Dan Cohen is one of my very favorite American journalists and broadcasters, and I'm delighted to welcome him to the mother of all talk shows this evening. Dan, it's day 445, I think, of Joe Biden's presidency. The minimum wage is still $7.50. How has he been doing?
Well, if you believe the polls, as well as reality, then Joe Biden has had a terrible presidency so far. I mean, some say it might be, one of, if not the worst president ever among them. I mean, his polls show it. He's hovering around 30%. So 70% of Americans do not approve of Joe Biden. He narrowly won against Trump, an incredibly unpopular president, largely thanks to the pandemic. Biden won. He's overseen a disastrous economic situation. Inflation is at its highest in 40 years. We have horrible poverty across the country. I think inflation's at like 8% now. Skyrocketing housing prices. So it's really just a disaster all around. And Biden's messaging has been that this is all Vladimir Putin's fault. That, your economic situation here in the U.S., if you're struggling, that it has nothing to do with the policies that, the Uniparty has enacted year after year and term after term. But this is all because Vladimir Putin decided to invade a peaceful, sovereign Woodstock 2022 in Kiev. And he's actually termed it Putin's price hike. And that's a reference to the massive increase in gas prices that are around $5 a gallon throughout the country, which, if you're wealthy, then that doesn't make a big difference to you. But for quite a large segment of the population here, that's makes it basically unbearable, where you can't get around and do your job or do basic things. So all of that anger and frustration, the Biden administration is trying to redirect again into support for basically a U.S. dirty war in Ukraine.
I wish it was $5 a gallon here in this country, Dan. I've got to tell you, British viewers will be scratching their head about that. But of course, $5 a gallon in America is a gargantuan price because it's always been so historically low in your country. The problem with that Joe Biden alibi is that the war in Ukraine is not even 2 months old. The American economy's problems predate it by a very, very long way.
Precisely. I mean, we've seen inflation skyrocketing over the past year. That was long before any Russian tank crossed over the border into Ukraine. These are a result of at-home economic policies and that basically have been a severe attack. Just another severe attack on the American working class, on American poor people. I mean, I think about, we've also had the destruction of the economy that came through lockdowns, where basically small businesses were forced to close for large amounts of 2020 when Trump was still president, and then into 2021. And that destruction has not been rectified. People haven't been helped because of that. I think of my neighbor who was evicted from his home along with 12 other people in his family, and lost his job working in a restaurant because of lockdown. So it's just one thing after the next, and there's really no hope in sight. I mean, it's true that, so Democrats are going to basically probably get massacred in midterms. So then we have Republicans who are they actually going to do anything better for American workers? I think you'd have to be a fool to think so. So it's really, I think actually the ruling class and Biden's advisors they see his approval ratings the same way that they see the Azov battalion and Ukraine in general. It's cannon fodder for an agenda. Ukraine is cannon fodder for war, for the U.S.'s kind of holy war against Russia. And Biden's term, his approval ratings are cannon fodder. His entire presidency is cannon fodder for war against the working class here in the U.S.
So, Dan, is all this frenetic international activity by the Biden administration, not just against Russia, but also against China, this constant emphasis on military intervention, sanctions against half the population of the earth are under American sanctions, whilst complete inattention to the needs of the mass of the American people. Is this all just displacement activity, or is one the causation of the other?
So your question is sorry, I don't totally understand the question. Go ahead, George.
Well, what I'm saying is he hyperactive overseas because he simply can't solve the problems of America? Or are the problems of America in part a result of the hyperactivity overseas?
Right. So which came first? I think it's kind of a which came first, the chicken or the egg conundrum. I think what we have is an empire in decline. And so certainly by going to war in Ukraine, all of the provocations that the U.S. and NATO were carrying out in Ukraine, while the media was saying, oh, Russian troops are amassing on Ukraine's borders as if it wasn't inside Russia. All of this certainly serves as a very convenient distraction from everything happening here in the United States, from the economic devastation that people are suffering. But I think it only really resonates with a small amount of the population. I mean, you see that in his approval ratings, which are, as I said, about 30%. But also, look at who's flying Ukrainian flags around the United States. If you go, I live in a low income neighborhood, a poor neighborhood, basically. No one's flying Ukrainian flags around here. If you go across the river into Capitol Hill, into the center of power in Washington, D.C., there are Ukrainian flags everywhere. And these are people, who believe that this is what the United States should be doing, or perhaps they're benefiting from it. Maybe they're a weapons contractor. I think this war serves as a very convenient distraction, but it's kind of hard to separate them because, war abroad also brings, it changes the economy at home. We've seen a very strong process of gentrification, for example, here in the United States over the last years, something that accelerates as more and more money goes into the war machine.
Extraordinary. Now, you rightly pointed out that the Republicans and the Democrats are Tweedledee and Tweedledum, or as I put it, less culturally polished, two cheeks of the same ass. But of course, they are the only two cheeks that people currently can vote for. In which case, it's quite likely, as you say, that the Democrats will take a drubbing at the midterms in November. Is Trump going to run again, in your view? And if he will he succeed?
I hate to speculate and make predictions. I think Trump remains the face of the Republican Party, and he's certainly remaining active, even though he's been censored and banned on social media. He's created his own social media site and this kind of thing. And he's doing events that, frankly, are popular. There was one a few months ago in the middle of Alabama, in the middle of nowhere. And there were tens of thousands of people there. Joe Biden, there's no way he could, or Kamala Harris, or whoever, the Democrats are going to run in 2024. There's no way they could attract 40,000 people or 50,000 people to the middle of, to some forgotten place in the middle of nowhere. So Trump still commands a very strong following. There's so much that can happen between now and then. I think one of the Republicans to watch out for is Ron DeSantis, who throughout the pandemic has really made a name for himself. I think he has a very strong chance of becoming the Republican candidate and actually even winning particularly because Democrats, they have nobody. They can't field anybody. I mean, they had to go with Joe Biden and just basically his celebrity off of being the vice president during the Obama years. But I mean, Kamala Harris, nobody likes her. She didn't win a single delegate in her home state of California. She can't debate at all. She's just incredibly unpopular. So, whoever Republicans run, Democrats are going to have an incredibly difficult time defeating them again.
It's fascinating, I must say. Dan Cohen, thanks for joining us. Hope we see you again soon.